Hey everyone, it's Carissa at Sprinkled with Glitter. Thanks for stopping by today. Today I have a card project featuring this gorgeous stamp from W+9. This is the beautiful bouquet Ranunculus. It is this gorgeous grouping of flowers, and I am going to admit to you, first off here, I am no flower expert, okay? So if I'm coloring these in the wrong colors, I don't really care. Can I just be honest? I don't. It was gorgeous. I wanted to color it. And what I'm going to be doing is actually embossing it on this piece of Essentials by Elle in Vellum. So I'm prepping the surface of the vellum and I'm using my Misty tool here. And the reason I'm using my Misty tool is because when I press it onto that vellum, this is a very large stamp, I'm going to be able to get a really nice impression. Now, that is for two reasons. One reason is because that lid of the Misty is a little bit flexible and more forgiving than a solid acrylic block. But the other reason is that it has that foam kind of behind it. So it gives you a really nice impression. It's like using the old mouse pad trick. So now you've seen me stamp it. Here I've added my super fine detail gold embossing powder and I am heat setting it. And I decided to leave that in there because you could really see that embossing powder change. And we all know that that embossing is just magic. So I just wanted to leave that in for you. So I'm going to be doing a little Copic coloring now. I will have all of the colors linked over at my blog so you can see those there. But I am going to start out by coloring these ranunculi. Are they ranunculuses or are they ranunculi? I don't know. So I'm going to start by coloring those in some various shades of pink. I'm coloring the larger one in a darker shade of pink. And I wanted to mention here that I actually have flipped this vellum over and I'm coloring on the back side. Now the reason is that if you take your Copic markers to that embossing powder that's on the front, it's actually going to etch away that embossing powder. You may end up with some of that embossing powder on the tips of your Copic markers. So when you're doing this technique, you want to make sure that you're flipping this over to the back side to color it. One other thing I wanted to mention about this technique is that your Copic markers are going to fade back quite a bit because that vellum's going to soften them quite a bit. So make sure you're picking colors that are a little bit more bold than you think you might need. You can always test them out on the top of your vellum just like I've done there. Now these little flowers here at the top, I don't even know what they're called, but I started out by coloring them blue and I decided I really didn't like that. So what I'm doing here is just taking my colorless blender and I'm scribbling over those areas where I've added the blue ink and then scribbling off on a piece of scratch paper. That's just removing the ink. You can also do this with rubbing alcohol, but I happen to have my colorless blender close by. So I've just scribbled off that ink and then I colored those in a yellow color instead. So now that I have my ranunculi or ranunculuses, I still don't know what they are, colored, I am going to go ahead and die cut this fabulous sentiment. This is from the Essentials by Elle line, and I've cut it out of some gold glitter cardstock, and I'm also cutting it from some black cardstock because I found that when I added that gold glitter over the top of the gold embossing, it was getting lost a little bit. So that black is going to act as a little shadow, and it's also going to help set it off of that gold embossing powder that's behind it. For the rest of my sentiment, I am using this word totally. It's from the Totally Awesome stamp set from the Essentials by Elle line, and I'm white heat embossing it on some black cardstock. Now you can see all that powder that's around the edge of that. That's because I've prepped the surface with my EK Success powder tool. It's going to keep me from having stray pieces of embossing powder all over that black cardstock. And if you prep no other cardstock, be sure that you prep your black cardstock because that's really where those stray pieces of embossing powder are going to show. So now that I have my sentiment all figured out, I am actually going to fussy cut around this grouping of flowers. I don't know what made me do it, but I really love the results. And you're going to see me add that here to the card front. But before I add it to the card front, I decided that this card front needed a little bit of texture. So I'm just using a background stamp. This is from Leah Griffith and Hero Arts. It's a wood grain background stamp, and I've inked it up in some Avery Elle Fog pigment ink, but I decided it was a little too dark. So what I've done is I've set that piece aside and I've grabbed another piece, and without inking it up again, I am just going to press that piece onto my card front. This is a A2 size card front. And so now I have a much softer pattern for the background of this card front. And I'm also going to add a little bit of stitching detail to it using this My Favorite Thing homespun stitch lines. It's one of my favorite recently. I've been using it like crazy. And then I'm just going to add a piece of this Avery Elle black and white striped pattern paper to the left edge of this card front as well. Now, we all know that I love black and white striped pattern paper on my cards, but this does more than just add a decorative element. It actually brings in that black element that I have used on the sentiment as well. So it kind of ties it all together. And I love the look of that bold black and white striped pattern paper against these really soft flowers that I've added to the front. So now I am going to add my shadow to my gold glitter sentiment here. I've just added a little zig two-way glue pin right behind that gold glitter piece, and I'm going to mount it onto the black piece. I'm kind of just offsetting it just a bit so that I have that nice shadow. And I'm kind of arranging all of my elements onto my card front, and quite honestly, I wasn't quite sure exactly how I wanted to do this. In the end, I ended up with it kind of that totally over to the left-hand side, and I'm going to attach that on there using a little bit of foam adhesive, and this is the arrangement that I end up going with. Now, I love to add a little bit of dimension to vellum when I attach it to my card fronts. I think it just adds to that really dreamy look of it. So what I'm doing is I am using a little bit of this Cool Tack clear foam adhesive. I'm putting it behind these flower groupings. I'm trying to concentrate it in areas where there is quite a bit of embossing going on so that it hides it a little bit more. Honestly, you can't really see it too much because between all the colors and the embossing, it really does do a great job of hiding it. And then I'm also using that clear foam adhesive behind this die cut sentiment as well. That shadow really added a lot of width to that sentiment and allowed me to hide that foam adhesive pretty well. Now, if there's one thing I do not like about this Cool Tack foam adhesive, the clear foam adhesive, it is removing the backers. I'm telling you, it is like the bane of my existence. But in the end, I think the effect was worth it, and I've just removed the backers there and attached that piece onto my card front. And now I'm going to slip a little piece of regular foam adhesive right behind this little leaf there, and it's just going to add a little bit of support behind this area where I'm adding my stamped and embossed sentiment. And then finally, I can just remove the backer from this gold glitter piece and attach it onto my card front as well. And I'm just going to kind of bring it up and overlap it over those flowers that are already there. Now, before I add this whole card front onto my card base, I'm going to add a couple more details and do a little bit of layering. So I'm going to start out by rounding this bottom right-hand corner of the card front. I'm using my We Are Memory Keepers 3/8 inch corner chomper. And then I'm going to layer that up. I wanted to add a little bit of dimension behind this, so I'm adding a little bit of ATG adhesive behind this card front, and I'm adding some scraps of the fun foam. So I'm totally out of fun foam. I'm down to my scraps, so I just added a couple behind there. You could also use the 3M foam adhesive behind that. And then I'm going to add this entire piece with that fun foam behind it to a layer of basil taffy cardstock. And that's just going to bring in the gray element that I brought in with that wood grain pattern behind the flowers there. So now I'm just going to take this entire layered piece and add it to my card base. I've made my card base out of some Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock. And I cut that to 4 1/4 by 11 and then just scored it at 5 1/2 to create a top folding card base. Now, to add a little bit of sparkle to this card, you knew I was going to do it, right? But this time I'm actually adding a mixture of the clear droplets along with the sparkling clear sequins from Pretty Pink Posh. And I've just added those on there with a little multi-medium in the matte finish from Ranger. And then I'll finish this card off by adding a layer of glossy accents over that die cut sentiment there on the bottom. So that completes my card project for today. I just adore this stamp from W+9, and of course I can't get enough of this fabulous sentiment from the Essentials by Elle line either. As always, I will have links to the featured products in the description at YouTube, and I will have a full list of products over at my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com where you can see more still shots and find more information. Thanks for stopping by today. I really hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. And until next time, I hope you have a totally fabulous day.